Have you ever sat in the quiet of the night, heart heavy with questions no one seems to answer? Have you ever asked yourself, why am I here? What is my true purpose? Am I walking the path I was meant to walk, or simply wandering through days that blur together? If these thoughts have visited you, you are not alone. Welcome. This is not just a podcast. This is a quiet space built just for you, a space of candlelight and soft breath, of stories that do not preach, but gently open the door to your own soul. Each of the 25 stories you are about to hear carries a single drop of Zen wisdom, ancient, gentle, and ageless, not to instruct you, but to awaken something that may already be sleeping inside. We won't rush. We'll go slowly, as though walking through a misty forest at dawn. Together, we'll pause, listen, reflect. You don't need to believe in anything. Just let go. Let the stories carry you. Let the silences between the words comfort you. Let your questions breathe. Somewhere between the bamboo groves, the still river, the tea that is poured with love, and the arrow released without fear, you may begin to see a reflection, not of who the world expects you to be, but of who you already are. So breathe. Sink deeper into your pillow. Let the noise of the world fade. And as the first story begins, ask yourself just one thing. What if my life has always been whispering my purpose, and tonight I finally decide to listen? Part 1. The Bamboo and the Wind. Inner Strength and Resilience. There was once a grove of bamboo that grew on the edge of a quiet village. It stood for generations, its slender stalks whispering in the wind, its roots entangled beneath the soil like an unspoken community. In the mornings, the dew clung to its leaves like pearls. At night, the moon wove silver into its green blades. But the villagers rarely noticed the bamboo. They passed by on their way to market, to temple, to their busy lives. They called it commonplace. All except for one man. An old monk who walked with a slight limp came every day and sat in the grove. He never brought anything. He didn't chant. He didn't teach. He just listened. Even when the wind howled, even when the storms came, the monk sat quietly, his robes fluttering like a faded flag, his eyes closed, his palms resting like two leaves in his lap. Children sometimes followed him, asking, "Master, why do you sit here? The bamboo doesn't speak." But the old man would smile, eyes still closed, and say, "Ah, but you haven't learned how to listen." One summer, the skies turned dark earlier than usual. Thunderclouds gathered, thick and bruised, and the villagers spoke of an approaching typhoon. They boarded up their windows, tied their boats, rushed to safety. But the old monk went to the grove. The wind arrived with a scream. Trees snapped like old bones. The river overflowed. Roofs flew like paper. And in the midst of this fury, the monk remained among the bamboo, his body still as stone. Villagers, watching from the hills, whispered prayers. Some thought he'd gone mad. Others thought he had become part of the forest itself. But when dawn came, the storm had passed. And the bamboo? It stood. Bent, yes. Some stalks leaned. Leaves were scattered. But not a single one had broken. Not one. Later that morning, a child approached the monk and asked, "Why does the bamboo never break?" The old man opened his eyes and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. He said, "Because it learns from the wind, not fights it. It bends, but it never surrenders. Its strength is in its softness, its power is in its stillness. He looked up at the swaying green around them and added, "This is how we must be. When storms come, not if, but when, we bow and we wait. Not all battles are meant to be fought. Some are meant to be witnessed with calm." Pause for reflection. If you've ever endured a season of your life where the winds howled, you know what the monk was speaking of. Perhaps you are in one now. Illness, loss, a decision you didn't choose, a silence in the home where laughter used to live. It is easy to believe in those moments that breaking is inevitable, that the weight of sorrow or uncertainty will snap something inside you forever. But the bamboo does not break. Why? Because it does not resist. It does not scream at the sky or shake its fist at the wind. It trusts its roots. It surrenders with grace. And so, when the sun returns, it is still there, maybe changed, but still standing. You too have a strength like that. Perhaps no one ever told you. Perhaps you forgot. But the storm remembers, finding your purpose in the bamboo. So how does this help us find our life's purpose? We often think purpose is grand, loud, a mountain we must climb. But sometimes it is not in the reaching, but in the rooting. To live with purpose is not always to act. It is often to endure. To bend, not to shatter. To stand through what others cannot. There is wisdom in your wounds. There is grace in your scars. There is direction hidden inside the very things you thought were detours. You were not meant to fight every wind. You were meant to listen to it, to ask, what is this storm here to teach me? And maybe, like the bamboo, to learn that your softness is not weakness. It is your greatest strength. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if your mind is full and your heart is tired, close your eyes and picture that grove of bamboo. Hear the wind. See the monk, still and unafraid. Let their calm become your calm. Let your breath move like the wind, slow, gentle, invisible but real. And tell yourself, like a quiet prayer, I bend, but I do not break. I am still here. I am rooted. And this storm, too, shall pass. When you wake, you may find something has shifted, not outside, but within. The first whisper of your life's purpose may already be rising with the wind. Part 2. The Farmer and the Water. Acceptance and letting go. There was once a farmer who lived in a valley carved by the breath of ancient rivers. He was not a poor man, nor a wealthy one. He had a modest house of stone and cedar, a field that gave rice in good years, and a quiet cow that gave milk in the mornings. His hands were cracked by work, but his eyes were kind. His name was Ray. Ray, like most men, wanted control. He wanted the rains to come when he prayed. He wanted the sun to stay hidden when the shoots were tender. He wanted the wind to be gentle when his daughter was sick. And when the world did not obey, he worried. He worried so much that it lived in his bones. When he walked, he clenched. When he spoke, it trembled. And though he said his prayers each evening, they sounded more like bargains than gratitude. One summer, the rains came too early. The field flooded, the seeds drowned. The earth turned to mud that sucked at his feet. His voice became sharp. He cursed the skies. He blamed the mountain spirits. He even scolded the river. But the river didn't care. It moved without guilt, without apology. One day, while Ray tried to redirect the water with wooden planks and rocks, a traveler appeared. She wore no shoes. Her robes were faded. Her eyes were calm. She watched Ray for a long time, saying nothing. Then, as he collapsed beside a pile of useless stones, she stepped forward and offered him a small cup. It was full of water. "Drink," she said softly. He looked up, suspicious, but thirst won. He drank. It was just water, and yet it was everything. She sat beside him, folding her legs beneath her like a leaf floating on stillness. "The water," she said, "is not your enemy." Ray scoffed. "It ruined my season." She tilted her head. "Did it ruin, or did it remind?" He frowned. "Remind what?" She pointed to the valley. "To remember that your control is an illusion." That night, Ray could not sleep. Her words floated in his mind like mist over the field. He remembered childhood, when his father told him the same thing, that the river does not belong to any man, no matter how much he prays. That life is not a horse to be steered, but a current to be trusted. But he had forgotten. He had grown older, and in that growing, he had learned fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear that if he did not hold on tightly, everything would fall apart. The next morning, he went to the flooded field and stood in silence. He let the water touch his ankles. It was not cold. It moved past him, around him, through the furrows and stones and stubborn barriers he had built. It didn't ask his permission. It didn't pause for his judgment. It simply was. And in that still moment, Ray did something he hadn't done in many seasons. He sat, he breathed, and he let go. Pause for reflection. Have you ever stood in a moment where life refused to obey? When the things you counted on, health, relationships, plans, slipped through your fingers like water? We all have. And in those moments, we often resist. We fight. We try to build walls and redirect the flow, just like Ray. But water does not respond to force. It responds to space. It teaches us that the more we tighten our grip, the more it slips away. That acceptance is not the same as giving up. It is opening up. When we stop demanding life be what it isn't, we begin to see what it is. And that is where clarity lives. That is where peace begins. The Zen of letting go. You may ask, but what about purpose? Isn't that about shaping a future, setting goals? Yes, but not with clenched fists. Zen teaches us that purpose does not arise from force. It emerges from flow, like water finding its path through stone. When we let go of needing to control every outcome, we make space for something deeper to arrive. An intuition, a calling, a shift in direction that we could not see while staring so hard at our plan. Letting go is not loss. It is permission. Permission to feel, to grieve, to move differently, to rest. It's only when Raina stopped fighting the river that he began to understand it. And so too, perhaps, will you. Letting this story settle. Tonight, if you are carrying a weight, a plan gone wrong, a decision you cannot reverse, a future that feels foggy, imagine the valley. See the water rising, not to drown you, but to move you. What if it's not ruining your life, but rerouting it? What if the detour is the direction? Sit quietly. Breathe. Feel the places inside where you are trying to hold on too tightly. And ask yourself, what am I resisting? Let the question drift. No answers needed, just presence. And in that stillness, repeat softly, I release. I trust. I open. And slowly, gently, as you sleep, allow the waters to carry you not away from your purpose, but closer to it. For what is meant for you will never need to be forced. It will flow. Part 3. The Two Monks and the River. Self-reflection and simplicity. There are stories that live not in books, but in footsteps. This one began with 2 sets of them, worn sandals brushing the dusty trail as 2 monks walked side by side under a canopy of quiet trees. The elder monk, Master Enso, was wrapped in faded robes that had seen many seasons. His movements were slow, deliberate, like the stillness of the moon reflected in a bowl of water. His younger companion, Sora, was lean and restless, with eyes that darted like dragonflies, full of questions, full of hurry. They were traveling from one monastery to another, carrying nothing but their bowls, their breath, and their silence. But on that morning, silence was not enough for Sora. "Master," he said, "how will I know when I've found my purpose?" Enzo did not answer. He continued walking. So Sora asked again, louder this time. Enzo paused. He turned to the younger monk, his eyes soft, and said, "When you stop trying to find it." Then he kept walking. Sora frowned. That was not the answer he wanted. Later that afternoon, they reached a river. It was wide and muddy, swollen from recent rains. There was no bridge. Standing at the water's edge was a young woman, cloaked in silk, her face full of worry. She looked at the monks and bowed deeply. "Please," she said, "will one of you help me cross? I'm afraid. The water is swift." Sora looked at her, then quickly away. Monks did not touch women. He had memorized that teaching. But Enzo didn't hesitate. He walked to the woman, lifted her gently in his arms, and stepped into the river. The water surged around his knees, then his thighs. But he walked slowly, calmly, like a stone parting the current. When they reached the other side, he set her down. She bowed again, full of gratitude, and disappeared down a separate path. Enzo continued walking, but Sora? He was fuming. He followed in silence for an hour, then 2, then 3, until finally, just before sunset, he burst out, "Master, we are not allowed to touch women. How could you carry her?" Enso stopped, turned. He looked at Sora gently and said, "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" There it was, a whisper of Zen. A teaching not shouted, not argued, not explained with grand speeches. Just a mirror, held up gently, asking, "What are you still carrying?" We all do it. We carry conversations long after they've ended. We carry judgments like stones in our pockets. We carry the voices of others, the ones that said we were not enough or too much. And the heaviest burdens of all are often the ones we picked up ourselves. Sora carried the woman not in his arms, but in his mind. And his mind, like so many of ours, was noisy with rules, fears, attachments. The simplicity of purpose. We often ask, "What is my purpose?" But perhaps the deeper question is, what am I willing to let go of to see it clearly? Purpose is not always about addition. Sometimes it is about subtraction. Not adding more achievements, but releasing more expectations. Not collecting more tools, but discarding more distractions. Zen does not offer you a ladder to climb. It offers you a seat, a breath, and the space to notice what's already here. Master Enso did not seek applause for his action. He responded in the moment, with presence, with kindness. And then he let it go. No attachment, no guilt, no replaying it in his mind. That is simplicity. That is freedom. And perhaps that is purpose. Letting this story settle. So tonight, I invite you to sit quietly. No need to try so hard. Let go of the urge to figure everything out before sleep comes. Instead, ask yourself with compassion, what am I still carrying? A memory? A mistake? A role you no longer want to play? You don't need to fix it tonight. Just notice it. Then imagine yourself, like Enso, walking into the river. Not to resist the current, but to move with it. To set down the burden you've carried too long. To walk on, a little lighter, a little clearer, a little closer to the still place inside you that has always known who you are. And as your breath slows, as your body softens into the bed, whisper softly, I let it go. I walk in peace. I am enough, here and now. And perhaps in the silence between those words, your purpose will whisper back, not in thunder, but in calm, like footsteps returning home. Part 4. The Arrow and the Target. Focusing on the present moment. In the village of Hoshin, nestled between whispering mountains and fields that turned gold in late autumn, there lived an archer named Takao. He was known far and wide, not for his speed, nor for his strength, but for a quality few could describe. They said his arrows flew like they had been destined to land before he even released the string. He never missed. His posture was simple, his eyes quiet. He never shouted, never competed. But whenever there was a challenge or a festival, the people gathered to watch him. It wasn't the arrow they watched, it was the stillness. One year, a visiting noble heard of Takao and came to see the legend for himself. He brought with him his own champion, an archer of fame and ego, who wore embroidered sleeves and a sharp grin. The noble offered a challenge. Let us see whose arrow is truest, yours or mine. Takao bowed. If the arrow wishes, he said. They agreed to meet at dawn. At first light, the villagers gathered. The mist had not yet lifted from the valley. A single target was set at the edge of the field, farther than most would dare. The noble's champion stepped forward, pulled his bow, and with perfect form, released. The arrow flew straight and struck the outer ring. Applause followed. Then came Takao. He walked slowly. No tension in his face, no drama. He stood, breathed, lifted his bow, and for a long while, he did not move. The crowd grew silent. Then, with a soft exhale, he released the string. The arrow flew like a thought and landed at the exact center of the target, piercing the heart of the wood. But Takao did not celebrate. He simply lowered his bow, bowed, and walked away. Later, a young boy followed him down the path and asked, Master Takao, how do you never miss? Takao looked at him, eyes warm like embers. Because, he said, I never shoot to hit the target. The boy blinked. Then why? I shoot to become the arrow. Pause for reflection. What does it mean to become the arrow? In a world where we're taught to chase results, rewards, recognition, it sounds absurd. But Zen points us not to the outcome, but to the now. The arrow does not worry where it will land. It only knows how to fly. Takao's aim was not perfection, it was presence. He did not focus on the goal, but on the breath before the breath, the space between heartbeat and release, the stillness where everything happens and nothing is forced. This is the paradox. When we stop trying to control the result, we begin to arrive exactly where we are meant to, the present as the path. You may ask, but what does this have to do with purpose? Everything. Most of us look for purpose as if it's a destination, a career, a title, a moment of glory. But Zen teaches us that purpose is not something we will one day reach. It is something we are already in, if only we can be present enough to notice. Takao's mastery came not from hitting the target, but from vanishing into the moment, merging with it, surrendering to the now so fully that the arrow simply followed his breath. And so must we. Your purpose is not out there. It is right here, in this breath, in this word, in this quiet night, letting this story settle. So tonight, I invite you to stop reaching, just for a while. You don't have to solve everything before sleep. Let go of the future. Release the past. Sit quietly, as if you too were drawing back a bow, not to hit anything, but to meet this moment fully. Feel your breath as the arrow. Feel your heart as the string, and whisper gently, I am here. I am not behind. I am not ahead. I am exactly where I need to be. Let the thought land. Let the silence wrap around you like a soft blanket. You are not lost. You are not late. You are the arrow, and your life is unfolding, not in someday, but in this very breath. Sleep deeply. Tomorrow will arrive on its own, but tonight your purpose is to be. Part 5. The Tea Master and the Guest. Finding purpose in simple acts. In the town of Nara, where the stone lanterns gather moss and time walks slowly through temple corridors, there lived an old tea master named Hisato. He was not a monk. He never preached or taught in formal ways. He had never written a book or stood before a crowd. Yet, every afternoon at precisely 4 o'clock, his garden gate would open with a soft creak, and someone, a traveler, a villager, a weary official, would step into his humble home to drink tea. That was all. No ceremony, no speeches, just tea. Yet those who left his home walked out a little differently, as if the dust of the world had been gently brushed from their shoulders, as if a window had been opened in their chest, as if they had, for a brief moment, remembered something they had forgotten. One day, a young man arrived from the city. He wore fine robes and spoke with the hurried tone of one used to power. He had heard whispers of the old tea master, how people came with questions and left with none. He wanted to test this, so he entered the gate, bowed stiffly, and sat in the place offered to him. Hisato, old and small, with hands like bark and eyes like moonlight on still water, poured the tea. He did not speak, he simply moved. Each motion, pouring the water, lifting the cup, folding the cloth, was done as if it were the first time and the last. Nothing hurried, nothing wasted. When he finally offered the cup, the young man asked, "Tell me, master, what is the meaning of life?" Hisato smiled, bowed slightly, and whispered, "This cup of tea." The young man frowned. "No, I mean the real meaning, your wisdom, your deepest insight." Hisato looked into the steam rising from the cup and said again, "This moment, this tea, this attention, that is all." Frustrated, the guest drank, and for a moment he tasted more than flavor. He tasted presence, the silence between gestures, the care woven into the temperature, the steadiness of the master's hands, and he realized he had not felt this calm in years. He left with no answers, only a strange, quiet fullness. Pause for reflection. We search so hard for meaning. We think it must be big, loud, a moment of transformation so grand that the sky opens and the earth shifts beneath our feet. But Zen teaches something softer, that the purpose of life is not found in one act, it is revealed in how we live every act. The tea master didn't seek to teach, he didn't try to impress, he simply gave his full presence to a simple thing, and that was enough. The sacred in the simple. You may ask, how do I live with purpose if I am just washing dishes, folding laundry, answering emails. But this question forgets something ancient. The bowl you wash may hold someone's hunger. The clothes you fold may warm someone you love. The words you type may reach a heart you will never meet. Purpose is not about what the world sees. It is about the intention you pour into what you do, like water into a cup. The tea master didn't need a crowd. He needed only one guest and one moment done with care. And that, dear listener, is enough. Letting this story settle. So tonight, I invite you to remember that your day, however ordinary, was not wasted. Every small act held the possibility of great meaning. You may not have cured an illness or solved a mystery, but maybe you looked someone in the eye. Maybe you made someone feel heard. Maybe you brewed your own cup of tea and for a few minutes sat in stillness. That too is purpose. That too is sacred. So as your body softens into the quiet of night and your breath grows slower, repeat softly, I do not need to be great. I only need to be present. Each small act can be an offering. And perhaps, as you drift into sleep, your life will begin to feel a little less like a puzzle waiting to be solved, and a little more like a tea ceremony, one sacred breath at a time. Part 6. The Sculptor and the Stone, Revealing the Self Within. In a village tucked at the base of a misty mountain range, there lived an old sculptor named Daiki. He was known not for how many statues he made, but for how few. Some said he only completed one sculpture every 10 years. Others said he could speak to the stone and hear its secrets. But all agreed, when he was done, the result was breathtaking. His figures looked as though they had always existed, waiting in silence inside the marble until Daiki had gently set them free. One day, a traveler from the capital arrived. He was young, full of ambition and hunger for knowledge. He had heard stories of the master and wanted to learn how to sculpt with such depth, such soul. He found Daiki sitting in a circle of stone fragments, a chisel resting beside him, his hands still. The traveler bowed and said, "Please, master, teach me how you create such beauty." Daiki smiled, his eyes lost in some distant mountain. "I do not create," he said. The traveler blinked. "But the statues, your art." "I reveal," Daiki replied. "I remove what is not true. The figure is already there." The traveler stayed for weeks, watching. Daiki worked slowly. Some days he touched the stone but did not carve. Other days he sat beside it in silence, drinking tea, listening. Finally, the traveler asked, "Why do you wait so long before shaping the stone?" Daiki looked at him and said softly, "Because I must listen until I see what is already inside." And then he added, "Purpose is not something you build, it is something you uncover." Pause for reflection. How often have we believed we must become someone, become successful, become stronger, become what others expect? But what if, like the stone, you are not meant to become? What if you are meant to remember? Zen reminds us that the path is not one of addition, but subtraction, removing what is not you, shedding the noise, the labels, the layers placed upon you by time, family, failure, culture. Underneath it all is a shape that has always been there, not perfect, but true. Your life's purpose is not a destination. It is the sculpture waiting inside you. Your job is to gently, patiently, lovingly reveal it. The work of uncovering. You may ask, but how do I begin? Begin with silence. Like Daiki, sit beside your own stone. Listen. What patterns have you followed that no longer fit? What dreams were never really yours? What voices in your head speak with judgment, not wisdom? And can you begin to chip away, one thought at a time, one breath at a time, not with violence, but with kindness? You are not trying to fix yourself. You are trying to find yourself. And that, dear listener, is an act of sacred sculpture. Letting this story settle. Tonight, as you lie in the quiet between stories and sleep, imagine that you are not broken. You are whole, but covered by years of trying to be what you were not. Feel the breath enter your body like a chisel of air. Feel it soften you. Feel it begin to loosen the pieces that no longer belong. And as you rest, whisper gently, I am not becoming. I am revealing. I am not missing. I am emerging. I do not need to be more. I only need to be true. Let the words echo softly in your chest. Sleep, not as someone escaping life, but as someone returning home, layer by layer, breath by breath, to the sculpture within. Part 7. The Lantern in the Dark. Guiding others through your own light. Long ago, in a mountain temple where the clouds brush the roofs each morning, there was a young novice named Haru. He was quiet, not because he had mastered silence, but because he did not yet know what to say. Among the other students, he was the least confident. His handwriting trembled. His chants lost rhythm. Even when he swept the garden paths, the wind would seem to scatter the leaves the moment he turned away. But Haru was kind. He was the one who always made sure the tea was warm, the one who folded blankets for the elders when the nights grew cold, the one who noticed when someone's eyes were heavy with sorrow, even if they smiled. Still, he often thought, I am not wise. I am not ready. I have no light of my own to offer. One evening, a great fog descended upon the mountain, thick, silent, and endless. It swallowed the paths, the trees, even the moon. That night, a monk from a neighboring temple had lost his way. His lantern had gone out, and the path was treacherous. When the temple bell rang once, signaling a call for aid, the master asked, Who will go? The senior monks hesitated. The fog was dangerous, the trail uncertain. But Haru, trembling, stood. I will. He took an old lantern, one cracked with age, its handle frayed. He lit a candle no bigger than his thumb, and stepped into the mist. The fog was thick. He could not see more than a few steps ahead. His hands shook, but he kept walking. The small flame flickered wildly, threatened by every breeze. He cupped it gently, whispering to it like a friend, Please stay. After what felt like hours, a figure emerged. The lost monk, cold, shivering, knees bloodied from the rocks. Haru did not speak. He simply reached out, offered the light, and took the monk's hand. Together they walked back, slowly, carefully, guided by a single flickering flame. When they arrived, the temple doors opened with gasps and praise. But Haru said nothing. He simply returned the lantern to its hook, bowed, and went to prepare warm tea. Later that night, the master came to him. Haru, he said, do you understand what you have done? I only carried a small light, Haru replied. The master placed a hand on his shoulder and said, Sometimes a small light is all the world needs. Pause for reflection. How many times have you told yourself that you are not enough, that your light is too dim, that you must wait until you are wiser, stronger, more certain before you can help others. But Zen teaches otherwise. The path to purpose is not always found in grand acts or bold confidence. Sometimes it is found in the simple willingness to show up with what little light you have, not to lead from the front, but to walk beside, to offer your warmth when others are cold, to become the lantern in someone else's fog, even if your own knees are still shaking. Your light as it is now. You may ask, how do I know if my light is enough? But perhaps that's not the question. Perhaps the true question is, who in your life needs a little of your light right now? It could be a friend waiting for your call, a child watching how you handle your struggles, a stranger receiving your kindness without knowing your name. The size of the flame does not matter. What matters is that you tend it, that you carry it with care, that you trust, even when the fog surrounds you, that your presence can still guide. And sometimes, the one you guide the most is yourself. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel lost, if your heart is weary, your thoughts clouded, your faith dim, close your eyes. Picture a mountain wrapped in mist, and within it, a lantern, small but steady. It is your light. It flickers, yes, but it still glows. And in this soft space of breath and sleep, whisper gently, I am enough to help. I am enough to light the way. Even if I am not there yet, I can still walk with someone. Let the thought soften your chest. Let the warmth spread through your body like the glow of a distant flame. You don't need to shine like the sun. Tonight, be the lantern, and trust that even the smallest light can change the darkness. Part 8. The Mirror of the Lake. Seeing your true reflection. At the edge of a forest where the pines grew tall and undisturbed, there was a lake so still that birds would mistake it for sky. It had no name. The villagers called it the Silent One. They said if you stood before it at dawn and gazed long enough, it would not show your face, but your soul. Many had tried. Warriors seeking proof of their bravery. Lovers hoping to see promises kept. Scholars wishing for signs of greatness. But most left confused. They said the lake showed too much, or nothing at all. Some saw their childhood selves. Others, faces they didn't recognize. One man wept for hours, though he could not explain why. And so the lake remained untouched by maps and left out of pilgrim routes, spoken of only in whispers. One year, a woman named Kaori came to the lake. She had traveled far, but not for fame. Her life had grown heavy, filled with roles that no longer fit, voices that spoke through her but were not her own. She had lived well by all appearances, a respected teacher, a mother, a wife. But somewhere along the way, she had misplaced herself. Not lost, just set down, forgotten, like a coat in spring. When she reached the lake, no birds sang. The wind held its breath. She removed her shoes and stepped to the water's edge. For a long while, she saw nothing but sky. Then, her reflection appeared. But it was not her current self. It was a younger version, wild-eyed, laughing, spinning barefoot in rain. Kaori blinked. Then the image changed. Now she was older, wrinkled, white-haired, eyes glowing with peace. And then the water stilled again. This time it showed only her face as it was, tired, wounded, but honest. And in that moment she did not look away. She sat by the lake for many hours, Not thinking, not seeking, just being. And slowly, something softened inside her. Not because she found an answer, but because she saw herself, truly, for the first time in years. Not through judgment, not through masks, but as she was. And somehow, that was enough. Pause for reflection. Have you ever looked in a mirror and not recognized the person staring back? Not because of age or change, but because somewhere, somehow, the real you had slipped beneath the surface? Zen teaches that the self is not fixed. We are not statues. We are rivers, clouds, echoes. We are not meant to be one thing forever. But in the stillness, when the waters of our mind settle, we can begin to see what has always been beneath the noise. The truth of who we are, not perfect, but real. Purpose through clarity. You may ask, how can seeing myself clearly help me find my purpose? Because you cannot walk your path if you are wearing someone else's shoes. So many of us live as reflections of others' hopes. Parents, teachers, lovers, culture. But true purpose is personal. It does not shout. It whispers, and you can only hear it when you are brave enough to sit quietly and listen to yourself. Kaori did not find a calling at the lake. She remembered a part of herself that had gone quiet, and that remembrance became her compass. Letting this story settle. So tonight, I invite you to imagine a lake, silent, clear. It is within you. It is not in the mountains. It is in your chest, behind the breath, beneath the memory. Sit beside it in stillness. Let the winds of your day settle. Let the waters clear. And as your reflection appears, tired, radiant, honest, greet it with kindness. Whisper, I see you. You've been here all along. You are enough. And as your breath deepens, as sleep draws near, let that image drift gently beneath the surface again. Not lost, but safe, waiting to rise again when you're ready. You are not what others expect. You are not who you were. You are who you are now, and that is the beginning of all purpose. Part 9, The Empty Boat. Releasing ego and embracing freedom. There is a story the river tells, but only to those who are quiet enough to hear it. It is not written in books, nor carved in stone. It is carried by the current, and it begins with an empty boat. In a village by the great river, a man named Ryo had built a life with order and pride. He was respected. He owned land, managed workers, and was known for being sharp of mind and firm in judgment. But beneath his crisp robes and measured words, Ryo carried a heaviness. He was always watching, always calculating, always guarding the image he had crafted, the man of purpose, the pillar of the town. He believed that if he let go, even for a moment, it would all fall apart, and worse, he would be forgotten. One summer, Rio took his boat out alone at dawn. The mist lay thick over the water. There was no sound but the hush of the current and the distant echo of cranes. As he drifted downstream, wrapped in thought, another boat appeared from the fog. It was coming fast, silent, unsteered, and before Rio could react, it crashed into his. Water splashed over his robes. His basket of fruit tipped, floating away. He stood, furious, ready to shout. But then he saw. The boat was empty. No one to blame, no one to scold. Just wood, water, and wind. In that strange, suspended moment, something shifted. Rio's rage dissolved into the river air. He sat back down. He laughed, not bitterly, but with a kind of deep surrender. And the river whispered, as it always does, "All boats are empty." Pause for reflection. What does it mean to realize the boat is empty? It means this: so much of our pain comes not from what happens, but from who we think we are when it happens. If Rio had found a man steering the boat, he would have shouted. His ego would have puffed up like a fire. But with no one there, no face to fight, he met only himself. And in that moment, he saw how often he had been reacting not to the world, but to his own reflection in it. The illusion of ego. Zen teaches that the ego is like a fog. It makes us believe we are separate, special, superior, or inferior. It whispers, protect yourself, prove yourself, be someone. But in truth, the more we cling to who we think we are, the harder it becomes to meet life as it is. Rio thought he was the man steering the boat. But what if, like that vessel on the river, he too was being carried by currents he did not control? Wind, time, birth, death. What if his real freedom was not in controlling the journey, but in surrendering to it? Purpose without ego. You may ask, if I release ego, who am I? That is the very door Zen invites you to walk through. You are not your name, not your role, not your past. You are presence itself. You are awareness. You are the sky that holds all weather. When ego dissolves, purpose becomes clear, not as a role to achieve, but as a way of being. You are not here to impress the world. You are here to meet it, open, awake, and unguarded, like an empty boat, flowing freely. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you find yourself tightening, defending, comparing, performing, close your eyes. Picture the river. Picture the mist. Picture a small wooden boat, drifting quietly, with no one steering. It bumps into yours. You pause, you breathe, and you whisper. There is no enemy. There is no one to impress. I am enough, even when I let go. Let your chest loosen. Let your shoulders lower. Let the river carry you. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not the mask you wear. You are the stillness beneath it. And in that stillness, your purpose waits, like a soft current beneath a silent boat. Part 10. The Gate Without a Lock. Trusting the Unseen Path. In a valley shaped like a quiet smile, where the rice fields bowed to the wind and the cicadas hummed like ancient prayers, there stood a wooden gate. It was old, weathered, softened by decades of rain and sunlight. And yet, it was strange, because though it looked like a barrier, it had no lock, no latch, no handle, just hinges that creaked softly when the wind nudged them open. The villagers called it the Gate of Not Yet. It stood at the edge of a forest that many feared to enter, not because of danger, but because it was said that the path beyond the gate was not visible until one walked it. Some claimed it was cursed, others said it was sacred, but no one could agree because few had ever gone through. They waited for signs, for maps, for certainty. And so the gate stood, silent, unlocked, unused, until the day Akio arrived. He was not a hero nor a mystic, just a man whose life no longer felt like his. His days were full, but not fulfilling. He had worked hard, done what was expected, gathered what was praised, and still something inside him whispered, "This is not it." He tried to ignore it, but the whisper grew louder. So he walked and walked until the valley opened before him and he stood face to face with the gate. He waited for someone to stop him, for a sign that said "wrong way." But there was only silence. The wind shifted. The gate creaked open, just a little. Not enough to see anything beyond, just enough to invite. Akio stepped closer. He placed his hand on the worn wood. It was warm. He breathed in, and he stepped through. Pause for reflection. Have you ever stood at a threshold, not of a house or a room, but of a moment? A moment when something deep inside said, "It's time to go, even if I don't know where." That's what the Zen path often feels like. It doesn't offer clear maps or glowing signs. It doesn't guarantee outcomes. It simply opens a door and asks, "Will you trust?" The mystery of becoming. You may ask, how can I trust a path I cannot see? But perhaps the path cannot appear until you begin to walk it, like stepping stones that rise from the mist only as your foot approaches, like a melody that writes itself note by note only when you begin to hum. Purpose does not always announce itself. It often emerges through motion, through courage, through the willingness to be uncertain. Akio didn't wait for clarity. He walked into it. And as he did, the forest unfolded, slowly, quietly, but faithfully. Each step revealed the next, each turn a whisper of belonging, surrender as direction. The gate had no lock because the real barrier was within: fear, doubt, the need for control. But once those were softened, even just a little, Akio saw what was always waiting. Not certainty, but aliveness. Not answers, but invitation. Zen teaches that surrender is not weakness. It is strength without tension. It is presence without demand. It is the deep knowing that you are guided, even when you cannot explain how. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you find yourself at a threshold, if something inside you knows there is more, though your eyes see nothing but fog, remember the gate. Remember that it is already open, not because you forced it, but because you were ready. Close your eyes. See the valley. Feel the wind. Place your hand upon the invisible doorway inside your chest, the one between the life you know and the life that is calling, and whisper, "I do not need to see the whole path. I only need to take one step. I trust what is unfolding." Let the breath carry you. Let the unknown become your friend. You don't have to be fearless, only faithful. For every purpose begins the same way, with a footstep through a gate no one else can open. Because it was never locked, it was waiting for you. Part 11. The Bell Without a Sound. Impact Beyond Recognition. There is a monastery in the high mountains where the clouds gather like soft animals, and the snow never fully melts. In its center stands a bell tower, old, simple, made of stone and cedar. Inside the tower hangs a great bronze bell, cast over 300 years ago. But it has never rung. The story goes that the bell was forged by a monk who had taken a vow of silence. He poured his soul into the shape of it, his prayers, his sorrows, his awe of the world, all melted into the metal. When it was raised and hung, the monks prepared a grand ceremony. They gathered below the tower, waiting for the first strike. But the silent monk shook his head. He placed his palm gently against the bell's curve and whispered, "Its purpose is not to be heard, but to be felt." Since then, no hand has struck it, and yet Every winter, travelers say they sense something shift as they pass the tower. A hush, a pause in their breath, a strange warmth in their chest. No sound, but presence. Years later, a young novice named Aiko arrived at the monastery. She had left the world behind, seeking something she could not name. Peace, perhaps, or a reason to keep breathing. She worked hard, swept the floors, lit the incense, but still she felt unseen. She watched the senior monks give lectures, write scrolls, teach visitors. She wondered if she mattered at all. One morning, she went to the bell tower alone. Snow fell silently. She looked up at the great bronze curve above her, and something within her broke open, not in despair, but in deep, quiet understanding. She whispered, "Maybe I am like this bell." Pause for reflection. How often have you wondered if what you do matters? If the kindness you offer, the care you give, the quiet effort you put into holding others up, is ever truly seen? We live in a world that rewards noise, applause, recognition. But Zen offers a different truth, that the deepest impacts often leave no visible mark, like a seed buried in winter soil, like a prayer whispered into the wind, like a bell that has never rung. Purpose beyond applause. You may ask, how can I know my life has meaning if no one sees it? But perhaps it's not about being seen. Perhaps it's about being felt. Your gentle patience with someone who didn't thank you. Your forgiveness quietly given that stopped a cycle of pain. Your steadiness in moments when everything wavered. No one may write your name on a wall for that, but lives were changed, hearts softened, chains broken. And you kept going. That is purpose. Invisible, but profound. The silent bell within. Aiko never became famous. She never wrote sutras or gave grand teachings. But decades later, a young monk would write in his journal, "There is a peace in her presence I cannot explain. She listens like she's holding my whole life in her palms." And another would write, "When I sat next to her, I wept without knowing why. It was as though she heard a sorrow I hadn't yet spoken." She rang no bells, but she echoed, and the echo reached where words could not, letting this story settle. So tonight, if you are tired of giving without being thanked, if you wonder whether your quiet efforts have meaning, if you feel like your life is just a whisper lost in the wind, close your eyes. Imagine the tower, the snow falling gently, the bell heavy and still, but alive with the vibration of everything it contains. And say to yourself, I do not need to be loud to be powerful. I do not need to be seen to be felt. My presence is enough. Let that truth settle in your bones. Let it ease the ache of invisibility. For your life may be the bell someone needs to feel, even if they never know it was you. Part 12. The Bridge That Builds Itself. Becoming Through the Journey. In a province wrapped in mist and stories, there was once a path that ended at the edge of a cliff. Travelers came, full of hope and direction, only to stop in frustration when the land gave way to a deep ravine. Below, a river rushed wild and hungry. The far side was fertile, green with promise, but there was no bridge, at least none that could be seen. So most turned back. They said, "The path is broken. The journey ends here." But some stayed. Among them, one man named Ren sat on the edge for days. He was not brave by nature. He had been a clerk, a father, a husband. He had done all the right things, until the day came when the right things no longer felt right, and the map he had followed for years began to blur at the edges. So he walked, seeking not escape, but something more honest. And now, at the edge of the ravine, he sat, unsure if he had reached the end or if something unseen awaited. On the third night, as the wind whistled like an old flute and the stars held their breath, Wren heard a voice, soft, from behind. An old woman stood there, wrapped in linen and thyme, leaning on a wooden staff. "You've come far," she said. Wren nodded. "But not far enough?" he asked. She tilted her head. "That depends. Do you need the bridge to appear before you believe it's there?" He looked down at the abyss. She continued, "There are those who step forward, and the bridge rises to meet them." Wren's voice shook. "What if it doesn't?" She smiled, a slow, endless smile. "Then you'll learn to fly." And she vanished. The next morning he rose before the sun. His hands trembled, his knees weak, but something inside had quieted, a deeper voice, not of certainty, but of courage. He stepped forward, one foot, over the edge. And where there had been nothing but air, wood appeared. A single plank, then another, and another. With each step the bridge grew, not before him, but beneath him, until, breath by breath, he reached the far side, and wept, not from relief, but from remembrance. Pause for reflection. How often do we wait for life to show us the full plan, to promise safety, to guarantee success, to display the entire bridge before we take the first step? But Zen whispers a different truth. The path builds itself through movement. Your purpose does not arrive first. It reveals itself as you walk. And often what looks like a cliff is simply a question, waiting for your courage to answer it. The faith of becoming. You may ask, how can I move forward if I don't know what's coming? And yet, haven't you done it before? You didn't know how to be a parent until you were. You didn't know how to love until you dared. You didn't know how strong you were until you had no choice but to be. Life is not a puzzle to solve in advance. It is a bridge of experience built by walking. Wren didn't wait for the bridge. He became the first step, and the step became the path, and the path became the purpose. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you are staring at your own invisible ravine, if you feel like the next chapter of your life has no map, no handrails, no promises, sit quietly, close your eyes, feel the edge beneath your feet, and say to yourself, I do not need to see the whole bridge. I only need to take one honest step. The path will meet me in return. Breathe slowly. Trust the trembling. Let the unknown become an invitation. For the bridge is not a structure outside of you. It is you, becoming, one step at a time. Part 13. The Bowl That Mends Itself. Healing as a Way to Purpose. In a hidden village known more by the whisper of trees than the ink of maps, there lived an old potter named Tomo. He was known not for the bowls he made, but for the ones he restored. When someone broke a beloved bowl or plate, they would not throw it away. They would bring it to Tomo. And he would sit with his old hands and quiet eyes and listen, not to the crack of the bowl, but to the crack in the owner's voice. Because in that village, things were not just things. They were memory. They were grief. They were love that had changed shape. Tomo practiced an old tradition called kintsugi, the art of mending broken pottery with gold. He did not hide the cracks, he filled them. He made them visible, he honored them. And when he returned the bowls to their owners, they were more beautiful than before, not despite their breakage, but because of it. One day, a traveler came. She had nothing in her hands, but her eyes were full of something even more fragile than clay. She said, "I heard you mend things." He nodded. "I have nothing broken outside of me," she whispered. "But inside?" And then her voice trembled into silence. Tomo made no promises. He simply invited her to sit beside him while he worked. For many days she returned. She said nothing more. She watched. The chisel, the dust, the gold. Until one afternoon, tears rose in her throat, not from sadness, but from recognition. She whispered, "I am the bowl." Tomo looked up, smiling gently, and replied, "Then let us mend you with gold." Pause for reflection. How many parts of you have been broken? Softly, silently, without ceremony. A loss that reshaped you. A betrayal that hollowed your trust. A goodbye that arrived without warning. We are taught to hide these fractures, to polish ourselves into perfection. But Zen teaches otherwise. It says, "The wound is not the end, it is the doorway." And healing is not erasure, it is illumination. You are not less because you have suffered. You are more. More open, more knowing, more human. Mending as purpose. You may ask, what does my pain have to do with purpose? Everything. Because once you stop hiding your wounds, you begin to see that they can be of service, not just to yourself, but to others. Your grief becomes compassion. Your emptiness becomes listening. Your story becomes shelter for those still breaking. Tomo didn't create new things. He revealed the beauty in the already broken. And perhaps your purpose is not to start fresh, but to hold the gold of your becoming and offer it, quietly, to a world that still believes it must be flawless. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel broken, not just tired, but shattered, close your eyes. Imagine a quiet table, a small lamp, a bowl in your hands. Cracked, yes, but whole in its desire to be whole. See the golden veins slowly filling the wounds, not to hide them, but to celebrate them. And whisper softly, "I honor my cracks. I am still worthy. I am more beautiful for having healed." Let the breath soften your chest. Let the shame fall away. You are not a discarded thing. You are a work of living art, mended not by forgetting, but by remembering. And in those lines of gold, your purpose gleams quietly, waiting to be offered. Part 14, The Path That Circles Back. Rediscovering what was always yours. There is a path that winds through the mountains like a ribbon left behind by the wind. No signs, no milestones, just soft earth, fallen petals, and the quiet hush of time. Few walk it more than once, but those who do always return different. Long ago, a boy named Naoki lived in a small village near that winding trail. He was curious, always staring beyond the trees, always asking, what else is there? He loved his village, yes, but its familiarity made him restless. The same tea, the same faces, the same songs sung at dusk. And so, on his 20th birthday, he kissed his mother's hands, bowed to the shrine, and set off down the path, promising to return with stories the mountains had never heard. He traveled far, through cities that never slept, through temples buried in snow, through markets that glowed like lanterns at night. He gathered teachings, met teachers, changed names, changed hair, changed languages, and still something felt incomplete. Years passed, then decades, until one morning, as he stood beside a river in a distant country, watching the sun melt over unfamiliar rooftops, a strange ache filled his chest. Not regret, not loneliness, something deeper, something like a longing, not to escape, but to return. He walked back, step by step, mile by mile, his stride slower now, his back a little bent, his eyes softer. He no longer sought stories, he sought silence. And when he finally turned a corner and saw the familiar wooden gate of his childhood, weathered but standing, he wept, not from sadness, but from the quiet joy of recognition. He had found nothing new, but everything had changed because he had. Pause for reflection. How many times have you searched for meaning in places far from yourself? In careers, in relationships, in titles and destinations. We are taught that purpose lives out there, that we must climb, chase, achieve. But Zen whispers a different truth. What you are seeking, you may already hold, but to see it, you may need to step away, to forget in order to remember, to leave in order to return with new eyes. The wisdom of the circle. You may ask, was the journey a waste if I only returned to where I started? But the seed and the tree stand in the same soil, and yet the tree is no longer the seed. Naoki's path did not lead him elsewhere. It led him back to himself, but not the self of youth, the self forged by experience, by questions that humbled him, by detours that softened him. Your purpose may not be a new destination. It may be a familiar place, seen differently, honored more deeply, lived more fully. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel lost, not in space, but in meaning, close your eyes. Picture a winding path through hills and memory. Picture yourself, younger, standing at its edge. And then picture your older self, walking back toward that child. No rush, no shame, only reunion. And say gently, I have traveled far. I carry new eyes, and I am ready to come home. Let your breath slow. Let your heart soften. You have not failed. You have not missed your way. You were gathering what you needed to recognize what you've always had. And now, the gate waits for you, not as a test, but as a welcome. Part 15, The Wind That Leaves No Trace. Letting Go of Legacy. In the highlands of the East, where the grasses grew like whispers and the sky seemed just a little closer to the earth, there lived a man named Tetsuo. He had no title, no children, no books written, no monuments built. He lived in a hut of wood and earth, beside a hill that faced the rising sun. Each morning, he would sweep the path outside his home, not because anyone walked it, but because he loved how the dust danced in the light. Each afternoon, he boiled tea, not for guests, just for the moment. Each evening, he would sit on the steps and listen to the wind, to the birds, to the stories that silence tells. Some villagers called him strange, others called him wise, but few visited him, and fewer still remembered his name. One day, a young traveler came to his door, carrying a satchel full of notebooks. He had heard whispers of Tetsuo's peace, and he had questions. "Master," he said, "I want to leave something behind." Tetsuo raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "A legacy," the boy said. "Something that will outlive me. A book, a teaching, a mark." Tetsuo nodded slowly, then poured the tea. He said nothing. But when the wind passed through the grasses, the old man smiled and said, "Do you see the wind? It leaves no trace, and yet everything it touches remembers." That night, the traveler could not sleep. He listened to the breeze brushing the walls. He watched the moonlight pooling on the floor. He thought of all the people he had met, some who had said grand things, and others who had said almost nothing, yet changed him forever. He realized it wasn't their words that stayed, it was their presence, their calm, their kindness, the way they made the world feel more breathable, like wind. Pause for reflection. How much of our striving is rooted in the fear of being forgotten? We write, we build, we accumulate, not only to live, but to last. We want to leave footprints, proof that we were here. But Zen teaches another way, the way of the wind. It touches everything, yet clings to nothing. It shapes the dunes, it carries the pollen that becomes the tree. It cools the brow of a tired worker, then moves on. No name, no monument, only movement, only breath, living without grasping. You may ask, but doesn't purpose require action, legacy, impact? Yes, but not in the way you might think. Tetsuo's legacy was not carved in stone. It was carried in hearts. The boy who sat with him that day would one day become a teacher, not of facts, but of presence. He would pause before he spoke. He would listen without waiting to reply. He would brew tea for no reason. And his students would say, "He reminds me of something I didn't know I missed." That was the mark, invisible, but indelible. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you are worried you have not done enough, if you fear that your life will disappear like mist, close your eyes, feel your breath. Picture a soft wind moving through tall grasses. You do not need to see it to know it's there. And whisper, "I do not need to be remembered. I only need to be real. The way I live is the trace." Let the words settle into your chest. Let the striving soften. Let the fear fall away like dry leaves. For you are not here to carve your name into the world. You are here to move through it with grace. And like the wind, that is more than enough. Part 16. The Guest Room That Waited. Making Space for What Matters. There was once a house at the end of a cherry blossom lane, nestled between a hill of prayer stones and a field of wild mint. It had 3 rooms: a hearth room where meals were cooked and shared, a sleep room where dreams quietly gathered and left again before dawn, and a 3rd room, always clean, always empty. The villagers called it the guest room that waited. The woman who lived there was named Hana. She had lived alone since her husband passed decades ago. She had no children, no pets, no visitors in years. And yet, each day, without fail, she would open the window of the guest room, sweep the floor, place fresh tea leaves in a small clay bowl, and fluff the cushion where a guest might one day sit. When asked why, she would smile and say, "Because someone might be on their way." They would laugh gently. No one ever came, but still, the room remained ready. One rainy spring, a boy from another village arrived. He had wandered too far, gotten lost, and collapsed from exhaustion near the gate of Hana's garden. She found him shivering under the tree, with more silence in his eyes than words in his mouth. Without question, she led him inside. She placed him in the guest room, lit a lamp, poured tea, waited. Hours passed. Then, quietly, the boy said, "Thank you for waiting for me, even before you knew I was coming." Hannah didn't reply. She simply bowed her head and smiled. Pause for reflection. How often do we fill every corner of our lives? Every minute scheduled, every room filled, every silence drowned in noise. We say we are preparing for life, but in truth, we are often afraid of the empty space. And yet, purpose cannot enter a crowded house. Meaning cannot bloom in soil too packed with worry, duty, distraction. Zen invites us to practice what Hannah did. Leave space, not for lack, but for invitation, not for absence, but for arrival. The courage to make room. You may ask, what if no one, nothing, ever comes to fill that space? But that is the beauty of it. The room was not a demand. It was an offering, a posture of openness, a readiness to receive whatever life, in its own time, might bring. Sometimes it brings a person, sometimes an insight, sometimes the quiet joy of finally hearing your own breath, and sometimes it brings nothing at all, just peace, just presence, and even that is enough. What might you be making room for? There may be a dream you've buried beneath busyness, a truth you've drowned beneath responsibility, a version of yourself you've forgotten, who still knocks softly on the walls of your sleep. That's who the room is for. That's who the tea is for. That's who you are preparing to welcome, even now. But you must be willing to wait, to empty a space, to trust that emptiness is not failure, but faith. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel too full of thoughts, full of noise, full of a life that moves but does not touch you, close your eyes, walk through your inner house, and find the room you've neglected. Clear the clutter, open a window, place a small cup of tea on a low table, and whisper gently, "You are welcome here. I've been waiting. I made space because I believe you are coming." Let the words echo in the stillness. Let them be enough. For purpose does not always announce its arrival. Sometimes it steps quietly into the room you kept ready. And when it does, you'll know. Part 17. The Tree That Never Asked. Serving Without Expectation. At the edge of a quiet village where the soil turned rich with memory and old rivers curved like calligraphy, there stood a tree. No one knew who planted it. It had no plaque, no legend, no name. But it was always there, tall, wide, still, and kind. Children learned to walk beneath it. Lovers carved initials into its bark. Travelers rested in its shade, weary from the road. Birds nested in its branches. Old men leaned against it to tell stories no one else remembered. And in autumn, when the wind turned gold, the tree let go of its leaves without resistance. When fruit came in spring, it dropped sweet orbs into outstretched hands without pride. It never asked who took. It never asked who thanked. It simply gave. One day, a man from the city came. He was tired, worn from years of running after a life that always stayed just out of reach. He sat beneath the tree, let his back rest against its bark, and for the first time in a long time, he did nothing. No goals, no guilt, just breath. And after a while, he whispered to the tree, "How do you keep giving when no one ever gives back? And the wind rustled through the branches like an answer, because giving is the life. Pause for reflection. How many times have you poured yourself out into family, into work, into love, only to feel unseen, unthanked, unappreciated? It is human to long for recognition, but Zen teaches us to look deeper, to serve not for reward, but for alignment, to give not for applause, but because it is who we are at our core. The tree does not keep score. It does not offer its shade conditionally. It gives because that is what trees do. And maybe, just maybe, that is what you do too. The quiet power of selfless living. You may ask, if no one sees what I do, does it still matter? Let me ask you this. When a child drinks cool water from a cup you washed, when someone breathes easier because you listened without fixing, when your kindness softens a day you didn't even know was hard for someone else, didn't something sacred happen? Even if no one noticed, even if no one said thank you. Tetsuya, the monk who once taught near that village, used to say, "To give without asking is to bow to the life in all things." Becoming the tree. You are not here to be repaid. You are here to remember that every act of care is its own completion. The fruit does not ask to be framed. The leaf does not need applause as it falls. And yet, their presence changes everything. So does yours. Every kindness, every quiet act, every unseen offering. They ripple, they root, they remain. Long after you've forgotten you even gave them. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel worn, if the weight of giving without thanks has made you doubt your value, close your eyes. Picture the tree. Feel its stillness. Feel its shade cooling your tired spirit. And whisper gently, I give, not to be seen. I serve because it is true to me. My life is generous, and that is enough. Let those words wrap around you like soft leaves. Let your breath rise and fall like wind through branches. You are not empty. You are rooted. And the gifts you offer, without fanfare, without debt, are the clearest expression of a life lived in quiet, radiant purpose. Part 18. The Ladder That Led Downward. The Hidden Strength of Humility. In the center of a monastery carved into the cliffs of a forgotten range, there stood a tower. It was not tall by architectural standards, but to the monks who lived there, it was a symbol. Not of power, not of glory, but of perspective. Inside that tower was a wooden ladder, worn smooth by centuries of quiet hands. Every morning, a monk was chosen to climb it, not for ceremony, but for cleaning the upper lantern, tending the quiet bell, or watching the clouds drift like thoughtless prayers. One year, a novice named Kenta arrived, bright, eager, restless. He had read many sutras, memorized wise sayings. He could quote ancient masters with sharp precision. But when it came time to assign chores, he always hoped for the tower, for the climb, for the view. It made him feel, if only for a moment, like he was ascending, not just physically, but spiritually. But day after day, he was given the cellar, dust, mice, water buckets, silence. And so he began to sulk, until one morning the abbot called him aside. You wish for the ladder? The abbot asked. Kenta nodded. The abbot smiled and said, Then follow me. But instead of entering the tower, the abbot led him to the garden. Behind a row of old plum trees stood a small door Kenta had never noticed. Stone steps led downward, carved into the earth. "Go," the abbot said, "and do not return until you find the highest place." Confused, Kenta descended. The stairs turned to tunnels. The tunnels turned to caverns. He found a cold spring, a crack where light touched nothing, the soft drip of unseen water. No golden bell, no sweeping view, just earth and breath and stillness. When he finally returned, the abbot was waiting with tea. Kenta bowed deeply. "I think I understand," he said softly. "The lowest place holds the most truth." The abbot smiled. "When you climb down far enough, you meet yourself." Pause for reflection. How often do we seek to go higher, to be better, wiser, more noticed, more needed? The ladder in our minds always points up. More titles, more clarity, more control. But Zen reminds us that real elevation does not come from rising above. It comes from settling below, into humility, into stillness, into the kind of knowing that does not shout, but listens. The ladder that led downward brought Kenta face to face, not with a view, but with what could not be seen. And there, without trying, he began to understand. The strength of going lower. You may ask, isn't purpose about climbing? In the world's eyes, perhaps, but not in the soul's. True purpose is not built on standing taller than others. It is built on being grounded enough to bow, to carry water, to sweep floors, to touch the pain of another without needing to fix it. It is not about being above others, it is about being beneath what is false, until all that remains is what is true. Kenta thought he wanted altitude, but he found meaning in depth, letting this story settle. So tonight, if you are tired of climbing, of chasing achievement, of reaching for something that keeps moving, close your eyes. Picture a quiet staircase carved into stone. It leads downward, but not into darkness, into quiet, into truth. And as you descend, whisper gently, "I do not need to rise to be worthy. I go down to go deeper. My strength is not in height, but in presence." Let the words rest on your breath. Let your spine soften. Let gravity become your teacher. For the ground has always been beneath you. And sometimes the most sacred ladder is the one that brings you home to it. Part 19. The Room Without Walls. Belonging Without Boundaries. There was once a temple far from the cities, high in the wind-brushed hills, where clouds came to rest like tired travelers. But this temple was unlike most. It had no doors, no windows, no gates, no walls. Just a roof held up by simple beams and a smooth stone floor open to the sky. People called it the Room Without Walls. Some said it wasn't a temple at all. Where is the boundary, they asked. Where does it begin and end? But those who had sat within it knew. It was not a place for containment. It was a space for remembering that we belong not by borders, but by breath. A woman named May once arrived at the temple. She had traveled through many stages of life: daughter, student, mother, widow. And in each, she had searched for a place to belong. She had tried churches, gardens, books, even crowds, but no space ever truly held her. She always felt too much, or not enough, too loud in some rooms, too quiet in others, until she came upon the temple with no walls. And when she stepped inside, she felt nothing pressing back, nothing judging. Only wind, only space, only sky. And she cried, not because she was sad, but because, for once, there was nothing between her and everything. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong? Not in a room, but in life. Like you were somehow on the outside, even when you were included. Like your presence needed explanation or apology. We all carry that ache, the ache of separation. But Zen offers a different view, that our suffering begins not with what we lack, but with the walls we build. Walls of identity, walls of fear, walls of mine and not mine. And purpose begins when those walls soften, belonging as a natural state. You may ask, where do I truly belong? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe belonging isn't found. Maybe it's remembered. Remembered in moments when you are so present, so open, that the lines blur. Between you and the sky, between you and another sorrow, between your breath and the leaves that made it. In the room without walls, May didn't find a new identity. She let go of needing one. And in that letting go, she expanded. She belonged not as a guest, but as part of the architecture of everything. Your purpose beyond the self. You don't need to stand out to matter. You don't need to prove your place. Your breath is already accepted by the trees. Your body is already a returning of stars. Your love, no matter how quiet, is already touching someone you may never meet. Purpose does not always wear a name tag. Sometimes it wears openness. You are not here to build a fortress of self. You are here to become porous, so that truth, sorrow, beauty, and stillness can pass through you, and so that others can find rest in your shade. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel like you do not fit, if you have searched for years for your people, your place, your reason, close your eyes. Picture a room with no walls, a roof open to the stars, a breeze coming and going as it pleases, and whisper gently, I do not need to be enclosed to belong. I am already part of everything. I let the walls fall away. Let the breath move through you. Let the world enter softly. You are not outside anything. You were never outside. You were the room all along. You just forgot you had no walls. Part 20. The Clock That Forgot Time. Living Beyond Urgency. In a monastery built beside a grove of moonlit cypress trees, there once hung a clock. Its hands were carved of sandalwood. Its face was a single piece of riverstone. For decades, it ticked faithfully, measuring time for the monks who chanted, who cleaned, who bowed. Its chimes marked the start of meditation, the end of meals, the rhythm of daily life. Until one day, it stopped. No bang, no break, just silence and stillness. The monks gathered. Some suggested repairing it. Others worried, without the clock, how will we know when to begin and end? But the abbot, old and quiet as mist, said, let's leave it. Let the monastery move by breath, not by bell. And so they did. They stopped timing meditation. They stopped counting minutes between tasks. They stopped rushing. And strangely, nothing collapsed. The tea still steeped. The sun still rose. The birds still knew when to sing. And slowly, so did the monks. One young monk, Jun, had always been restless. He had come to the monastery not out of peace, but out of exhaustion. He had lived in a world where everything had a deadline. Achievement, productivity, purpose, they called it. He had worn watches, set alarms, measured progress in seconds. But here, in the absence of the ticking clock, something shifted. He began to feel his breath again. He noticed how long it took the light to change color on the garden wall. He heard silence between sounds. And one morning, as he swept the steps, he whispered, "Maybe purpose was never in the hurry." Pause for reflection. How much of your life has been lived by the clock? Wake at this time, finish by that time, move faster, do more, be better now. We are taught that time is something to be chased or feared. But Zen teaches that time is not a master, it is a mirror. And when we rush past it, we miss ourselves. The clock stopped in that monastery, and suddenly, everything began. Presence over progress. You may ask, but if I let go of urgency, how will I find my purpose? But what if urgency is what's been hiding it? When you slow down, you begin to hear the small voice that's been drowned by noise. The quiet knowing that doesn't arrive in a rush, that doesn't shout over traffic, that doesn't bloom under pressure. Your purpose may not be waiting at the finish line. It may be curled up right beside you in this very moment, asking only to be noticed. Living in deep time. John stopped measuring his days in tasks. He started measuring them in quality of being. Did I breathe fully today? Did I offer presence to another? Did I taste the tea or only drink it? He still did things, but they no longer did him. His time was no longer sliced into hours. It was held in moments, soft, wide, sacred. And his life became not a race, but a rhythm. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel behind schedule, behind others, behind some version of who you thought you'd be, close your eyes. Picture a clock on the wall, its hands still, its face calm, and the room quiet, because there is nothing left to chase, nothing urgent to solve. Only this breath, only this silence, only this now. And whisper gently, I am not late. I am not running. I am already within the moment that matters most. Let the breath lengthen. Let time become air. Let purpose arise, not as a demand, but as a friend who walks at your pace. No clock can hold your life. Only presence can. And that, dear one, is more than enough. Part 21. The door that opens inward. The journey into the self. There is a path in the forest that many have walked. It winds past fallen trees, over stone bridges, through bamboo that sways like breath. Along the way, there are many doors, some large and grand, carved with dragons and gods. Others small, half hidden in ivy, like secrets waiting to be remembered. Most people stop at the doors that open outward, into new lands, new teachings, new stories. But very few notice the one door that opens inward. An old tale says the door is carved of no wood, made of no metal. You cannot see it with your eyes, only with your stillness. You cannot touch it with your hands, only with your attention. And it appears only when you stop searching. A monk named Sayo once spent decades chasing meaning. He studied with masters, traveled across deserts, read scriptures under moonlight. Until one day, exhausted and hollow, he sat beneath a tree and said, I have searched the whole world, and I am more lost than ever. And then, in the stillness, he felt it. Not a breeze, not a vision, but a presence, like something had been waiting inside him all along. And, in that moment, the door appeared and opened. Pause for reflection. How much of your life has been spent looking outside for answers, for guidance, for permission? We seek teachers, lovers, callings. We climb ladders, ask questions, follow trails. But Zen teaches that the longest journey you will ever take is the one that leads inward. Not because it is far, but because it is quiet. And the noise of the world keeps pulling us away. The door within. You may ask, but what will I find if I go inward? And the answer is you, not the self others see, not the self built of roles and routines, but the self beneath, the one who watches, the one who knows, the one who has been waiting. Going inward does not mean turning your back on the world. It means turning toward the part of you that was never lost. The door opens inward because the truth has always lived inside. The courage to be with yourself. It takes strength to sit in silence, to face what you've hidden, to listen to the echo of your own longing. But it is in that quiet that clarity begins, not in a flash, but in slow warmth, in small, steady breaths, in the moment you realize you are not empty, you are spacious, and within that space lives everything you need. Your purpose, your peace, your return. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if your spirit is weary from searching, if your mind is tired from knocking on doors that never opened, sit still, close your eyes, turn gently toward the center of your being, and there, in the hush behind thought, feel for a doorway. It is already ajar, and on the other side is not something new, but something ancient. Your own voice, your own knowing, your own quiet welcome. And whisper softly, I come home to myself. I no longer need to seek outside what lives within. I open the door, and I enter gently. Let the breath guide you inward. Let the moment hold you. The world will wait, but you have waited long enough. Welcome in. Part 22. The silence between two notes. The sacred pause of becoming. In a coastal village where the sea spoke in sighs and the sky never raised its voice, there lived a flute maker named Kiku. She was old, not in bones, but in presence. People said her flutes didn't sing, they remembered. Each one was carved by hand, not from the finest wood, but from driftwood she found after storms. She would hold the wood against her cheek before beginning, as if asking, what song still sleeps inside you? Then she would begin, slowly, lovingly. And when the flute was done, she'd place it on a cloth and whisper, the song will come. A young musician once visited her, full of ambition, full of notes. He had learned all the scales, mastered all the breathings, played in halls that echoed with applause. But still something was missing. When he asked her to make him a flute, she agreed, on one condition. That you listen, she said, not just to the sound, but to the silence between. The boy laughed. I came for music, not silence. She smiled. Then you may leave with neither. He stayed. She carved. And when he played the finished flute, he found that the tones were haunting, not because they were loud, but because they hung in the air after they ended. He began to realize the beauty wasn't just in the notes. It was in the pause that came after, the stillness, the breath, the waiting. He stopped rushing through the melody. He began to let the music breathe. And suddenly, the flute began to speak, not to crowds, but to hearts, especially his own. Pause for reflection. We live in a world that fears the pause, the empty space, the unanswered question. We fill the silence with sound, the rest with motion, the stillness with productivity. But Zen teaches that without the pause, there is no song. Without the breath, there is no life. And in that stillness, something sacred unfolds. Something that doesn't shout your purpose, but gently reminds you of it. The power of the in-between. You may ask, how can nothing be part of something? But the moon rises because the sky is empty. The note matters because the silence holds it. You are not failing when you rest. You are becoming. Not everything grows in motion. Some seeds open only in stillness. Some truths arrive only when you stop chasing. Some parts of your purpose are not meant to be built. They are meant to be received. In the pause, in the quiet, in the sacred space between two notes. Learning to trust the silence. The young musician returned to his city, but his music changed. He played slower. He left space. He looked up more than down. And people said, "There's something new in your sound." But he knew it wasn't new. It was the oldest part of him, finally given room to breathe. That, he would later say, was the moment he found his real calling, not in the song, but in the space it required. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you are in a pause, between jobs, between chapters, between versions of yourself, do not rush to fill it. Do not label it lost. Sit with it. Close your eyes. Feel the breath between heartbeats, the gap between thoughts, the hush after an exhale, and whisper gently, "This silence is not empty. It is preparing something in me. I do not need to rush. I only need to listen." Let the space hold you. Let the stillness soften you. Your next note will come. But for now, trust the pause. It is not the end of your song. It is the part that gives it meaning. Part 23. The Lantern Lit at Noon. Purpose Beyond Visibility. In a quiet village where the rooftops glowed with moss and the afternoons always smelled faintly of citrus and soil, there lived a woman named Sumi. She was not a teacher, not a healer, not someone the villagers turned to for answers. She kept to herself, collected herbs, fed the birds, lit incense at dawn, not for ritual, but for rhythm. And every day, at the same hour, just after lunch when the sun hung highest, she would light a lantern and place it outside her door. People found it curious. Why light a lantern when the sun is shining? She must be forgetful, or perhaps lonely. But Sumi never explained. She would simply tend the flame, nod politely, and return inside. The lantern burned softly through the brightest hours, then flickered out just as the shadows returned. She never used it at night, only at noon, only when it made no sense to others. One day, a traveler stopped by the village. He had wandered far, looking not for landmarks, but for wisdom that did not wear a name. When he saw the lantern, he paused. He watched the flame flicker in the summer heat, and instead of asking why, he simply sat beside it. Sumi stepped out, nodded, and offered tea. They drank in silence, and finally the traveler said, "Not all light is meant to be seen." Sumi smiled and whispered, "Some light is simply meant to remember itself." Pause for reflection. How much of your energy has gone into being visible, being acknowledged, being understood? We are raised to believe that purpose must shine, must be recognized, must justify its own existence through applause. But Zen teaches us something gentler. That which is most sacred often glows quietly, not for attention, but for alignment, not for others, but because that is what it is. Like a lantern lit at noon, it does not wait for darkness to validate its light. The integrity of presence. You may ask, what is the point of shining if no one notices? But purpose is not a performance. It is not stage-bound. It is not audience-dependent. Purpose is presence, lived truthfully. When you smile at a stranger who never looks back. When you clean a room no one will see. When you forgive someone who will never say thank you. That is light. That is alignment. That is your lantern, and its glow is real, regardless of who stands to witness it. Becoming the flame without needing the dark. Sumi never needed the night to justify her flame. She lit it because something inside her knew that when you live by your own rhythm, when you move from your quiet truth, when you stop waiting for the world to give you permission to be luminous, then your purpose is already fulfilled. The light shines, not to change the world, but to stay in harmony with your own soul. And the world, it shifts anyway. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel unseen, not because you're invisible, but because your light doesn't match the noise around you, close your eyes. Picture a lantern, simple, steady, lit in broad daylight, and whisper softly, I do not need to be noticed to be true. I do not need darkness to shine. I carry the flame for myself, and that is enough. Let the breath slow. Let the judgment fall away. You are not behind. You are not missing the moment. You are the moment, and your flame, however quiet, however unseen, is still burning. Part 24. The Thread That Mends the Sky. Your place in the greater weaving. In a mountain village where the clouds hung low enough to touch the trees, there lived an old woman named Rena. She was a weaver, not of cloth, but of stories, of prayers, of memory. She spent her days sitting on a wooden bench beside her door, twisting threads of all colors and textures into long, endless braids. When people asked her what she was making, she would smile and say, I'm stitching the sky. They would chuckle gently and move on, thinking her whimsical. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind blew strange, villagers swore they saw stars where there had been only darkness before. One winter, a young girl came to her, crying. She had lost her mother. She felt small and useless. Why am I still here? She asked. What am I meant to do? Rena didn't answer. She handed the girl a thread, soft, pale blue, almost translucent. Here, she said, add it to the weaving. The girl looked at the loom. The tapestry was vast. It stretched farther than the eye could see. She hesitated. But my thread is too thin. Rena smiled. Then it's perfect for the sky. They sat in silence. The girl added her thread. It disappeared into the weave. No louder, no brighter, nor more visible than before. And yet, something felt different. The ache inside her chest softened, not because she had been given an answer, but because she had been given a place that didn't need to be earned, just held, just woven, just enough. Pause for reflection. How often do you wonder if what you do matters? In the vast tapestry of this world, with its wars and wonders, its tragedies and triumphs, what could your quiet life possibly contribute? But Zen invites us to see differently, not through scale, but through subtlety. You may not be the banner, the golden thread, the centerpiece, but you may be the tiny stitch that holds the whole thing together. the invisible knot that prevents the fabric from unraveling, the gentle repair in the corner where someone's soul had torn, the interbeing of purpose. You may ask, isn't purpose supposed to be mine? But perhaps. Purpose isn't about possession. It's about participation. You are not a solo note. You are part of a symphony. And even if you never hear the full song, even if your thread disappears into shadow, you are still vital, still woven, still held. Reno's weaving was not for display. It was for continuation. It was for connection. And perhaps yours is too. Becoming the thread. The girl returned many times after that day. She brought her own threads, colors from her dreams, textures from her sorrow, and she wove, not to be known, but to remember, that even the smallest offering can become the stitch that mends the sky. Years later, when Rena passed, the loom sat silent, but the tapestry remained. And some say that when they stood before it, though they couldn't find their own threads, they felt whole, as if they had been part of it all along. Letting this story settle. So tonight, if you feel small, if the world feels too large, too loud, too lost, close your eyes. Picture a loom, wooden, weathered, and stretching from your heart, a single thread. Not perfect, not shiny, but yours. Add it to the weave. Trust that it is enough. And whisper softly, I am part of something greater. My thread may be small, but it holds the sky. I do not need to be seen to belong. Let the breath become your thread. Let your presence become your offering. You were never outside the tapestry. You are one of its oldest, quietest strands, and the sky is healing because of you. Part 25. The Mountain That Bowed. Completing the Circle. There is a mountain near the sea, ancient and wide, whose shape resembles a figure bowing, not because it fell, not because it broke, but because it chose to bend. The villagers call it the mountain that bowed. Children are told it once stood taller than all others, sharp, proud, reaching for the stars. But one day, it saw the suffering of the valley below, the drought, the storms, the silence. And so it lowered itself, bowed its great back to the sky, and in doing so, caught the rain, sheltered the winds, and became the spine of a new forest. No longer the highest, but suddenly the most nourishing. A monk named Yori once came to live near that mountain. He had spent decades seeking truth in lofty places, temples, scrolls, ideas, but his heart remained heavy. He still believed that if he just climbed higher, he would finally see it all. Until one evening, standing before the mountain, he felt something strange. Not awe, not ambition, but permission. Permission to stop climbing, to sit down, to bow, not in defeat, but in arrival. He whispered, maybe the end of the search is when we choose to kneel. Pause for reflection. How many of your years have been spent reaching for answers, for status, for clarity? We are taught to rise, to grow, to ascend. But Zen teaches that true fulfillment often comes not from standing taller, but from lowering the self with grace. To bow is not to give up. It is to give in, to truth, to tenderness, to the understanding that nothing is missing. Only the struggle to prove otherwise. The return to ground. You may ask, if I stop striving, will I still matter? Yes, because mattering does not come from motion. It comes from presence, from the way your breath stills a room, from the way your silence listens deeper than speech, from the way your spirit, having wandered so far, finally rests. The mountain bowed, and in that gesture, it became home for birds, shade for tired travelers, roots for forgotten seeds. It found its purpose not by reaching up, but by becoming ground. The circle closes. Yori stopped seeking new teachings. He began tending to the soil. He planted herbs no one asked for. He offered tea to those who didn't know they were thirsty. He said less, smiled more. And when asked what he had learned after all his travels, he answered, "I have learned how to return." Not as he was, but as one who had remembered. That life is not a ladder, it is a circle. And when we finally bow, the circle closes with peace, letting this story settle. So tonight, at the end of this journey, 25 stories long and lifetimes deep, breathe. You have climbed. You have questioned. You have reached into the dark. Now you may bow, not to anyone, not to anything, but as the mountain did, to stillness, to enoughness, to the sacred act of ending without needing more. Close your eyes, place your palms over your heart, and whisper softly, "I have walked far. I have asked deeply, and now I bow." Let your body soften. Let the stories settle in your chest like seeds. Some will bloom now, some will wait for rain, but all of them live in you. Not to teach you what to do, but to remind you of who you are and who you've always been. Thank you for listening. Rest well, dear one. You are home. A closing meditation for the soul. So here we are, 3 hours later, 25 stories told, 25 quiet awakenings shared from voices long forgotten, from mountains, rivers, birds, monks, tea masters, children, and wind. You've walked with bamboo in the storm, sat beside a silent lantern at noon, held a thread that mended the sky, and watched a great mountain bow. And now, here you are, not at the end of a path, but at the place where you remember. You are the path. Take a breath. Feel your chest rise and fall, not because I say so, but because it's always been rising and falling. Even when you forgot, even when you rushed, even when you hurt, it never left you. Neither did your purpose. It was there, beneath the noise, quiet as a monk in the garden, patient as moonlight. It didn't need to shout, because it was never lost, only waiting for you. What if you've already found it? People come to Zen not to find more, but to let go. Let go of chasing the horizon. Let go of comparing journeys. Let go of believing that purpose is something you need to deserve. It isn't. It's already alive in your breath, in the way you pause when someone needs space, in the way you choose kindness over control, in the way you sit in silence and allow the world to simply be. And tonight, in the way you stayed, in the way you listened. That is purpose. That is presence. That is you, without needing anything else. You are the empty boat. There is an old Zen metaphor. A man is crossing a river in a small boat. Suddenly, another boat crashes into his. He screams, prepared to curse the stranger who steered into him. But as he looks, he sees the boat is empty. No one meant to hurt him. No one meant to cross his path. It was just an empty boat, drifting, like all of us. And in that moment, his anger dissolves. So do his expectations, his demands, and all that remains is peace. You, dear one, are that empty boat. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to steer perfectly. You don't need to be filled with answers. You only need to float, to feel the river under you, to let the wind carry you when you're tired. And when you reach the far shore, whatever and whenever that may be, you'll know. You didn't waste your life. You lived it, fully, simply, silently enough to hear your own heart again. What happens now? Now you rest. You don't need to use these stories. You don't need to remember each detail. Let them fade like dreams. They've already done what they came to do. They've stirred something ancient inside you. They've reminded you that you were never broken, that you never had to run, that even in your stillness, you are becoming. So close your eyes now, not in escape, but in trust. The world will continue to spin. Let it. You are allowed to be still, to be soft, to be home. A whisper just for you. If you ever feel lost again, and you might, because that's what humans do, come back here, to these stories, or to the wind, or to the space between two notes. Return not to find something, but to remember that everything is already within you. You are the bamboo, bending but never breaking. You are the farmer letting go of the flood. You are the tea poured with care. You are the flute's silence, the mountain's bow, the thread that disappears but holds the sky. And you are the listener, the one who stayed, even now, still here, still breathing, still becoming. A final invitation. If these stories touched something in you, if they softened the edge of your thoughts, if they helped you sleep just a little easier, then carry their stillness into your next moment. Don't try to hold them. Let them hold you. And when you're ready, whether tomorrow, next month, or in another lifetime, come back, not to seek, but to sit again, and to know. You are never truly alone. We are all boats on the same water. We are all threads in the same sky. We are all purpose, woven softly into the breath of now. Let the silence be the teacher. No more words tonight, no more striving, just silence. Let it be your blanket. Let it be the story beneath all stories. And from that silence, sleep. Not to escape, but to return to the place where you are no longer becoming, but simply being. Good night, dear soul. Your journey is honored. Your presence is enough. You may rest now.